Welcome, everybody, to Come Back to Love. I'm Robyn Vogel, and I am your host on Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. I'm so glad you're tuning in. I wanted to introduce myself to those of you hearing me and listening to me for the first time. I am recording here from Boston, Massachusetts, in the US. I've been working as a love and intimacy coach, a certified internal family therapist, and I am the creator of not only Come Back to Love, but the program Ready for Love in 90 Days. This radio show is a sacred space where we explore the real, raw, and beautiful journey of coming home to love, starting within ourselves and extending to the relationships we long to heal, deepen, or ignite. Each week, I'll share powerful tools, heart-opening stories, and transformational insights to help you release the old patterns that keep love just out of reach and rewrite the story you truly want to live. Whether you're healing from heartbreak, feeling stuck in familiar dynamics, or simply craving deeper connection, you're in the right place. I also want to invite you to my free 2-hour class called Break Your Patterns in Love. The series itself is called Free Love, and it's a live, empowering experience designed to help you uncover what's really been holding you back in love. And it's designed to guide you toward the relationship you deeply desire. And I will say relationships because the work impacts all relationships. You can sign up anytime. All you have to do is go to freelove.today. Freelove.today. Pretty easy to remember. You can catch Come Back to Love radio show every Thursday at 1 a.m. and 1 p.m. Eastern on Dream Vision 7 Radio. You can listen from your phone, in your car, online, or just ask Alexa to play Dream Vision 7 Radio. And today, I'm excited to say that I am not introducing a guest. I am actually introducing myself. I have not done a solo radio show yet, and I'm recording this in July of 2025. And I'm very much excited to just be here, me, myself, and I. I wanted to answer a bunch of questions that people have been asking and that they do ask repeatedly over the years, and also introduce myself to my listeners in a deeper way. The first question that people ask me all the time is, how did I get into this work? It's a great question because the work is really unique. Let me start with how unique the Come Back to Love work is. First of all, Come Back to Love is not only the name of my radio show, it's also the name of my upcoming book, due to be published on February 9th with Kohler Books. But it's also the name of my business. The name of my business is Come Back to Love. In fact, if you go to comebacktolove.com, you will find out all about my business and all the different things that I do. You'll learn more about me. You'll see more details on programs, services. You'll see the love notes I've received over the years. You'll be able to contact me through my website. So that's a great place to go. As long as I'm talking about Come Back to Love, I'm going to encourage you to check out my website, comebacktolove.com. So I've been in business for 20 years. This business actually started in 2004. So it's been a little over 20 years now. And the big question that people ask is, how did I get into this business? And again, just to go to why it's so unique, it's because it's a blend of things. Yes, I'm a psychotherapist. I have a master's in counseling psychology from Lesley University, then Lesley College. I studied not only counseling, but expressive arts and working with kids and working with adults. And it was straight up psychotherapy with a creative twist for sure. So that's how the work began, steeped in the realms of counseling and psychology. But the next piece, with a little drum roll, is Tantra. And that's a piece that people are very curious about, because what is Tantra and how does Tantra blend with Come Back to Love? So I'll say just how it blends first so we can have a picture of the work. because my work is really steeped in the spiritual and the sensual sexual practices and philosophy of Tantra. Tantra is an ancient, ancient practice. Some people feel it goes way, way back to even other civilizations, depending on what you believe. But it's an ancient practice originated in Tibet and India. And when people think about Tantra, sometimes they think about the Kama Sutra. So they just think about like sexual positions and how to have like great sex. And that is some realm of it for sure. That is definitely part of it. A big part of Tantra is how to make your life better living on the planet now. So, really, really big part of Tantra has to do with awakening the senses, connecting with yourself, using breath, using sound, using movement in your own body, with yourself, and for yourself. Tantra is also about connecting with other people and how we not only see the divine in ourselves, but we see the reflection of the divine in others as well. And so there's a big body of work that has to do with creating sacred space for sexuality, for connection, for dropping into the heart, for gazing through the eyes. And all of these things are part of my practice and part of my teaching. And the backdrop of being a psychotherapist and integrating those two is really, really powerful because you can have somebody doing these ecstatic practices, which can be awesome and uplifting and opening and heart opening and can be energy field opening, blast out into the universe sometimes. And for me, it's so important if you're going to have those experiences to also understand what's happening in our psychologies. So, how do we feel safe? How do we feel safe in a connection with somebody else? How do we feel safe or not in a sexual connection with somebody else? What happens when there's intense arousal? What happens when our core wounds get triggered? What happens when we get afraid and we don't want to be vulnerable? What happens when we lean out instead of leaning in? So the psychological piece, the psychotherapy piece, the healing of the emotional body and the energy body is so, so important to living a healthy and joyful life with yourself and with a partner if you choose. And so for me, the blending of psychology and Tantra together is like it's the perfect marriage, if you will, because you're working on your being and your body and your relationship from all the different places that need to be addressed. And we all know ourselves in relationship when we get triggered. And I was just talking to a client right before this recording, right before this radio show. I was just talking to a client about the triggers and the core wounds. And everybody has a core wound. So if you're listening in and you're like, oh, I don't know, I don't think I have a core wound, or I don't know what mine is. I want to invite you to reach out, first of all, if you're not clear what your core wound is, because I do have a free quiz and program called the Sacred Archetypes that will support you in learning more about which core wounds and which archetypes are at play. Some of the more common ones that you might recognize in yourself are being abandoned or a wound of abandonment. There's also a wound of not being seen, not being heard, not being valued. And if you just think of those two, like you might fall into one of those two categories right away. And let me characterize them a little bit more for you. So the one who doesn't feel seen, that person might show up as very quiet. And in their quietness, they feel suppressed and repressed and stifled. And then they're just perpetuating the not being seen, right? And then not being seen becomes the trigger. So you show up at a group or a work event and you're quiet and you're not really engaged and you can't really get a word in edgewise and you're like, ugh, nobody sees me here. And that's the core wound of not being seen, not being heard. The abandonment wound is a very common one, of course. And for me, that's the one that resonates for me the most because, as many of you know, but I know I have a lot of new listeners here today, my core wound comes from my mother's illness and death at a very early age. So I had this experience of abandonment really young, like age 6. And so for me, the situations in my life that come up put me back into that feeling, that nervous system feeling of being abandoned. And that feels, of course, really awful and really devastating. And what happens in our lives is that we choose somewhat subconsciously situations that bring us back to the core wound for the purposes of healing the core wound. And I'm not going to say healing completely because I don't really think that happens, but certainly healing, continuing to heal. But not only the healing. So let's say like we can heal, we can keep growing and healing and evolving and maybe get to like 80% healing. But it's also learning how to manage when this core wound shows up because it keeps showing up. I bet if you took a day and decided to notice your core wound coming up through the day, first you have to identify what the core wound is. So again, go to my website, comebacktolove.com, and set up a call with me. That would be the best way to help you identify it because we can identify it really, really quickly. So the first thing is to identify the core wound. Okay, what's my bucket? There's about 4 or 5 most common ones in humanity, and you want to know which one is yours. When you know which one is yours, then every time you get triggered or you get irritated, you get activated, you get frustrated, you get upset by something, or someone, you most likely, if you really looked closely at the layers of the upset, you would land in the bucket of your core wound. And that's really, really, really helpful because once you identify it, what the core wound is, you can heal it, right? The first step is awareness. So again, if you're listening and you're like, oh, I don't really know, like I get triggered by this and that, and they don't seem related, which absolutely could be your experience. It's very common. But I bet if we hopped on the phone for just a few minutes, we could actually identify the core. And we want to pull the weeds out at the root, right? We don't want to like just snip them off at the top and leave the roots in the ground to grow again. We do our best to get to the root and pull it out. So that's why healing, identifying your core wound, and then doing the repair work is so important. So this is a great place to start to understand where tantra and psychotherapy or coaching meet. I know coaching and psychotherapy are two different things, and I do both, was trained in both, but this is the meeting place of these two. Because you're identifying your core wound, you're noticing what happened, what the current situation is that got you triggered, activated, irritated, pissed off, upset. And then you are able to, when you've got this down, you're able to say, oh, okay, my abandonment core wound is being triggered right now. And then what do? You do what I just did. You automatically take a breath. And once we take a breath and we start moving our bodies and we start bringing in the tools of tantra, along with the tools of neuroplasticity, we start to repair. We start to heal the young child that was wounded to begin with. And we start to learn tools. Notice I said tools, tantra and neuroplasticity tools that you can use any day, anytime, any moment when you feel triggered or activated. So like I said, just to repeat, we identify the core wound. And then the goal is to, yes, do the healing and repair work, but also to learn the tools to manage the wound for the rest of your life. So that every time it comes up, every time your partner does X, doesn't do the dishes in the sink, or says something in a tone that feels, irritating to you or judgmental to you, and your core wound gets activated. First of all, you know it's getting activated. You might bookmark, okay, in my next coaching session with Robyn, we're going to work on that core wound to do some more repair work. And you have the tools in the moment to actually soothe your nervous system, calm your nervous system down so that you get what we call regulated again. And breath and sound and movement, all the tools of tantra, the somatic practices, those are all so healing because we need to do the work, as you already know, most likely on a physical level along with the emotional level. So this is a broad but also deep share and teaching on what come back to love really is. It's a blending of these powerful modalities and ways of being with yourself and loving yourself through this work that allows you to come back to love with yourself, which is the first step and the first priority of the come back to love journey. I'm going to pause for a commercial break with some more. I will be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Come Back to Love Radio. This is Robyn Vogel, and we are on Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Or you might be watching this video on another format because we are also on 60 podcast platforms. So this is really an amazing thing. If you're listening in, I just want to remind you that this is a syndicated radio show. There are so far just under 40,000 listeners to the Come Back to Love radio show, and I've only been hosting this show for about 6.5, 7 months. 40,000 listeners from all over the world. Shout out to those of you that keep listening every week. I adore you. I love you. Please subscribe, like, follow, and do all the things on social media that you can. And keep coming back every Thursday, 1 a.m. or 1 p.m. You can also go to Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. You can choose the Come Back to Love radio show in the tabs. And there are all of the shows that I have done since January archived. And you can listen, you can re-listen, you can download, save, re-listen again. The number of guests I have had that have contributed so significantly to our humanity, to our healing, to our growing, to our coming back to love. Each episode, I have interviewed a fascinating guest, whether it's about resting and healing the nervous system, or mindful self-compassion, or self-love, or relationship styles. I mean, and becoming an empty nester. There's been so many varied topics. I really encourage you to go back and listen and take it all in. Yeah. And it's what's so great about a radio show, as you already know, is that you can have this in your headset while you're going on an exercise walk. And I often will listen to episodes before I go to sleep, and sometimes even while I'm sleeping, to take them into my subconscious when I'm working on something or I just want to learn something new. There's a lot of research that shows that as you're in that kind of sleeping dream state, your brain can actually continue to take in information and learn and grow. So that's pretty cool. All right. Back to the topic at hand. Okay, you know what? I know that I started this radio show by saying that people ask me how I get into doing this unique work. And then I went on a tangent to tell you about the unique work. So it wasn't really a tangent, was it? Okay, how did I get into this work? It's a big question. It's a big, vulnerable question, but I am in the habit and the pattern and the comfort of sharing vulnerably with 40,000 strangers. Although I know some of you know me personally. Anyway, how did I get into this work? Wow. So I was married when I was in my 20s. I had two children. And after about 10, 15 years, about 15 years altogether, I realized that I was growing in a totally different direction. And I really honestly wasn't my full self, my authentic self, really who I truly was when I was in my 20s. As I told you, I had so much trauma with my mother's illness and death, and beyond that, my childhood was extremely difficult, and I grew up with a lot of PTSD from it. And so finding a partner during those years where I hadn't really done enough healing work was wonderful because I really adore my ex-husband, my husband, as I say, and my children, of course, are the greatest gifts on the planet. And I wasn't myself fully yet. So I made a decision, and we made a decision to go separate ways. And one of the things that's really unique about us is, and for those of you going through divorce or thinking about divorce, you might listen in now in this moment deeply. We did therapy together, of course, as we were trying to figure out what to do and if we should stay together and how to stay together. We did it during the separation process, which was very challenging. And we did it after we got divorced for a couple years as co-parents. And if you can believe this one, we brought in or welcomed in, invited in, when she arrived on the scene, my husband's new partner and then wife. So the three co-parents met with actually two therapists because they were working together as a couple, the therapists themselves. So we had these group meetings, 5 people, sorting through things that were difficult and challenging and painful. And that work, along with some other work, which I'll share in a moment, really, really helped me know relationship from the inside out, like nothing else did. You could study it, which I did. You could do a couples therapy training program, which I did. You can do divorce mediation training, which I did with the best in the country. And those were all so incredibly helpful. And doing the work from the inside out was the most helpful. In fact, it was my ex-husband who said to me one day, and I'll never forget the moment, outside the office of the therapists that we had just seen, he said to me, "You know, Robyn, you should do this work in your practice." I had already had a psychotherapy practice going. "You should do this work in your practice." And I was shocked to hear that and really took it in. And he was like, "You've learned so much in our relating, our coming together and our coming apart, and our coming back together in a different way, in a co-parenting way." And we've had to do a lot of really, really present, connected co-parenting over the years. In fact, we still are. So 20 years later. So that was such a huge gift from my ex-husband, from my children's father, from my partner in life at that time that he gifted me with. Now, fast forward, because that was the shift to working with couples, working with relationship, working with sexuality, working with intimacy. Fast forward to an experience with a future partner where in the sexual connection, I had a mystical experience that felt like God. The only word I could possibly use was God. And I don't usually use that word, but that was the word that I used. Because that's what it felt. And in that, it woke me up. All my senses were awake. I realized a connection to spirit that I hadn't felt before through a sexual connection. And being a very good, educated person, I thought I need to study this. So I started studying tantra. And we started teaching together because we had had this mystical experience together. He had already been meditating for, I don't know, 20, 30 years already and was very deeply spiritual. I was just kind of getting my toes in the water. But I said yes because I knew that it was my path. And so we started teaching Tantra workshops together. And now the current form of those same workshops 20 years ago, they're in a slightly different form because I'm teaching them solo and sometimes with other people contributing. But it originated, right then and there in that mystical moment. What that was, I don't know, 2005 maybe or 2004. So Yeah, that's how I got started on this journey. And it's just been evolving and going and changing and growing. And now I have this, 12-week program called Ready for Love in 90 days that I've been running for 3 years. It's been so potent and powerful for those that are single and heartbroken and really wanting to be in relationship and frustrated that they're not. In fact, I was just messaging with someone who really halfway through the program last year met her partner. She was posting on Facebook just today about how they're on vacation at the beach and how amazing it is. And I thought, my goodness, this woman came into the program like kind of forlorn and wondering, is it ever going to happen for me again? Am I ever going to fall in love again? And literally halfway through the program, not even at the end of the program, she's like falling in love. And now, a couple years later, or a year and a half later, still together, so happy, on vacation. Like, I love this work. I love seeing the changes that people make and how they impact their lives for the long haul. It's not just a breakthrough moment. It's like life changes, your love story changes, and it's beautiful to witness. And doing the work is is paramount, and it's deep and it can be fun and it can be playful and it can be sad and it's everything because life is everything. In another episode, I'll go through the details of what the work actually is. But here we are, here I am, 20 years later, ready for love and guiding people on their journeys to love. So, if for this episode, I asked people if they had any questions they wanted me to answer. And that is what I'm going to do. Yeah, we're going to just keep right on rolling. So, the question that came, I'm just going to read it. I have been single for some time now, since a fairly dramatic breakup years ago. I don't know how I can bring someone into my life who I am excited about and who is good for me, and vice versa. Also, I'm not sure I can give a partner the things he or she would need, as I still have some pretty unsettled areas of my life. Should I wait until I am potentially more whole or try to make connections now? It's such a good question because I was also, and thank you, Christine, for posing the question and for posting it in my private Facebook group. Just the other night, I was at a networking event with women, and somebody asked me the same question. How do I know when I'm ready? And the answer is usually not what people want to hear. I get asked that question a lot. If I had an FAQ of the questions that I get asked a lot, that is one that I get asked a lot. Because, when people are feeling crappy and heartbroken and lonely and alone, they want to be in partnership. They want someone to love. They want to be loved. And I mean, Christine asked two questions. I'm going to start with the second one, which is should I wait? Now, there's a couple of ways to answer that. Should I wait? We don't want to wait for perfection, right? Because we're never perfect. We're humans and our lives are what they are, and we're always growing and changing and working on ourselves. And there are moments where it's not the right time, where maybe you're steeped in. I was talking with someone recently. She's burnt out from work. She's having a big stress at home with her son, and she wants to date. And she's dating a little bit, but is she really ready and available? Not so much right now. And that there's a lot of wisdom in being able to say, I want this, but I need a month or two, or I need a year to get through whatever I'm getting through because you want to give it your full attention. I will say that. For those of you listening that are single, that want to be in a relationship, please invite yourself to give it your full attention. So I would say to Christine that there's no need to wait till you're fully whole, quote unquote, because that doesn't really exist in the human condition and in humanity. But when you're asking the question, which isn't quite how Christine asked it, but somebody else the other day, how do I know when I'm ready? Part of the answer is when you're not asking that question. Because if you're asking, how do I know when I'm ready? Implicit in there is, I'm not sure I'm ready. And so I think there will come a time when you're not asking that question and you're just clear, hey, I'm available. I've done some healing work. I'm not feeling pulled and tied to a heartbreak or to an ex. I'm feeling present in my life. My work is pretty stable. It has its ups and downs, but that's life. I'm actually available to go on dates. Some people say, oh, yeah, somebody asked me out, and I can see them in 4 weeks and 2 days on a Friday at 1 until 2. It's like, I understand. And that might not be the right moment. So, you're available and you feel aware of what's happening in your being and your body. And this is a big piece of the work we would do together, so that when things are coming up and you're moving slowly into connection with somebody, you're able to pause and say, okay, what's happening for me? How can I navigate this? Because it's vulnerable. It is vulnerable to love, period, end of sentence. Anybody that steps into love and thinks it's not going to be scary, I'm sorry to say, it's scary. It's scary to open your heart. Implicit in opening your heart is heartbreak, is losing, is death, is divorce, is separation, is just triggers and hurt, like all those things that can be so challenging for our tender hearts to deal with are potentially part of your journey. So it's courageous to step in. So check in with yourself, ask yourself, are things settled enough to kind of manage the things that are likely going to get activated when I step into a relationship or I step into dating? The other part of Christine's question. I've been single for some time now, since a fairly dramatic breakup years ago. I don't know how I can bring someone into my life who I'm excited about. Yeah, that to me, and shout out to Christine and thank you for listening and being here and asking. What's showing up for me in your question is how dramatic the breakup was years ago. Of course, I don't know what happened. I don't know the story, but my heart is feeling like there's something pretty big that happened there. And those parts most likely need some repair so that they feel some courage to move very slowly to open up to bring someone into your life. Because implicit in your question is, I don't know how I can bring someone into my life, which says to me, it feels really scary. And that makes sense. And if it doesn't feel scary, then, I'm sorry I misread the question. Um, but someone who you're excited about. It seems like there's probably some more repair around whatever happened with the breakup. And I think you already know this, but working with a coach, working with a therapist can really help. I like to call it excavate more of the healing that's available to you, which is actually the exciting part. So we're going to go on a quick commercial break, and I have another question from our listeners. Be right back. All right, welcome back to Come Back to Love Radio. We've got one more question from our listeners today. I'm going to dig it up and read it to you. And I want you to know that you can email me anytime questions for me to answer on the radio show. Just email me at Robyn, ROBYN, at comebacktolove.com and put in the subject line, question for your radio show. Question for the radio, question for the radio show, make it known in the subject line, and then ask your question. And I won't use your name. I did, Christine posted publicly, so I used her name, but I don't have to use your name. Obviously, won't use your last name. You can ask anonymously, and I will answer your question on the radio, and I will let you know which episode it will be so that you can listen. But hopefully you listen every week. All right, so this is a question from another person who's part of my private Facebook group, which you're welcome to join, by the way. It's Come Back to Love Community on Facebook. What is a good strategy to find and attract a partner who lives consciously and has been doing some personal development work for themselves and around love and relationships? Oh my goodness. Thank you, Jason, who gave me permission to use his first name, for asking this question. It's such a good question. And I know it's a question that many, many people have. What is a good strategy to find and attract a partner who lives consciously and has been doing some personal development work for themselves and around love and relationship? What I am going to say to that is to find yourself workshops, classes, dances, yoga studios, um, tantra classes and retreats, all of those spaces where people gather. Because, like marketing for business, when you're looking for your audience, you want to ask yourself, where can I find my audience? Right? I ask myself that in business all the time. Like, where are the people that are interested in come back to love? Where are they hanging out? Are they hanging out at the local bar, drinking, shots all night? Probably not, but maybe some. But they're more likely to be found right in personal growth realms somewhere. And it's the same thing. It's the same answer to your question, Jason, and to those of you holding that same question. Where the question to ask yourself is, where are they hanging out? Where are they spending time? Are they at some kind of festival? Are they at Dance New England's dance camp, which happens on the East Coast of the US? Are they at a Network for New Culture event? I'm just throwing out communities that I know. Are they at the Body Sacred, other communities that I'm aware of? Are they at the Human Awareness Institute? But also, are they at local gatherings, little, small adult education classes that are focused on something that you're interested in that has a focus on personal growth? So that's what I'm going to leave you with today. I really look forward to hearing from any of you how this radio show has resonated, how the answers to the questions have landed for you or not. And again, you can send any of that and all of that to Robyn, Robyn, at comebacktolove.com and let me know. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to receive your questions. Once again, you can find more information about me and Come Back to Love at comebacktolove.com. That's all spelled out. You can also find me on Instagram with the same name. You can find you can find out information about upcoming classes on the website, but also if you want to sign up for the next 2-hour free class, go to freelove.today, and you'll just get the next date and you can sign up. And I would love to see you on a Zoom call live. I love having intimate connection, which is why I do a lot of those classes, because the intimacy is so powerful, so healing and joyful. And hey, let's face it, my work is all about intimacy. So thank you so much for being here, everybody. I so appreciate having this opportunity to connect with you and be my own guest on the Come Back to Love radio show. I look forward to seeing you next week, Thursday, 1 a.m. or 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or Eastern Time. And I wish everybody a beautiful day. Mwah. See you soon.